Hello and welcome to the Motoring News Zone, the show where we take you through the biggest stories in the world of cars right now. This week we explain why Ford's massive £100 million EV fine could cripple the UK car industry. We show you how to avoid the most common car scams in 2025, and we also explain how you can stay safe while driving in winter weather this January. All that and a whole lot more is in today's show. Let's dive in. So, Happy New Year, everybody. Welcome to 2025. And already we've got some pretty severe weather warnings coming in here in the UK. In fact, some fireworks displays for New Year were actually cancelled. I think the ones in Scotland and Edinburgh were, and a lot of other big cities as well saw their fireworks displays cancelled. But anybody who travelled on New Year's Eve, I did the same thing. I went across to near Manchester over the M62 for New Year's, and it was absolutely horrible travelling around. But we've got some winter weather on the way. That was mainly rain and wind. This is snow and ice. So let's have a look at what's going on here, guys, with this. And of course, every kind of step really they need to take to try and ensure they have a safe journey at the start of January. Road Safety and Breakdown organisation GEM Motoring Assist is urging motorists to take extra care with winter weather predicted across all parts of the UK in the next 3 days. Around 5 centimetres or 2 inches of snow is expected across northern England, the Midlands and Wales, with heavier falls over higher ground. There are also warnings of potentially disruptive snow for parts of Northern Ireland and Scotland. Road journeys are more difficult and treacherous when there is ice on the roads or a fall of snow. GEM is encouraging drivers to plan ahead and be ready to postpone journeys if necessary. This avoids the risk of getting stuck or breaking down, and it helps reduce the pressure on the emergency services and breakdown providers who are likely to be at full stretch in winter weather, says GEM. For anyone who does have to travel though, GEM offers some simple safety tips to try and stay safe during the winter weather period. First of all, you need to ensure that your car is properly equipped for the likely conditions. In particular, ensure that the battery is in the best possible shape. Listen for weather updates and plan your travel accordingly. Ensure that your windscreen and all other windows are completely clear of snow and ice before you set off. Give your lights and number plate a good wipe as well, and of course make sure that your front window is defogged as well the other windows as well. That takes a lot of time. Stick it on full whack in terms of the highest setting for your internal air system, basically the fans in the inside of your car. That's something that takes a long time, particularly if you have an older car. My old Hyundai used to take an absolute age to do that. It used to take about 10-20 minutes, and when it used to snow it was annoying, but you have to make sure it's clear before setting off. Whatever you do, don't wipe the inside of your windscreen. That is going to cause you a lot of pain down the line when it comes to dirt on there as well. Prepare a set essential of items to take with you, including a shovel, fully charged mobile phone, torch, ice scraper, food, water, jump leads, first aid kit, warm clothes, and a supply of gravel or sand to assist with grip if your wheels are spinning. Might seem a bit overkill, guys, but at the end of the day, you want to be safe with stuff like this. You would not be regretting that if you get stuck at the end of the day, and you definitely would regret it if you didn't take them. In winter conditions, keep your speeds down, leave plenty of space between yourself and the vehicle in front, and be ready for sudden, rapid deteriorations in conditions. Keep a safe distance behind gritter trucks and snow plows as well. Only pass when it's safe to do so. Let someone know where you're going and when you're expected home. Ensure your mobile phone is fully charged before setting off, just in case you need to call for help. Take your charger with you to ensure you don't run out of charge as well, if your car is able to actually do that through a USB port or whatever. And remember that driving in conditions like this is hard work. You're likely to become tired much more quickly than in challenging conditions, so ensure you building brakes on your journey if possible. It's not just a physical exertion of doing more steering, more gear changes, really riding the clutch and things like that. It's also, on top of that as well, the mental aspect of it as well. Even if you physically feel kind of similar, the mental drainage you'll get from a long journey will be much higher because you'll be concentrating much more on your surroundings, as you should be in those conditions. GEM's head of road safety, James Luckhurst, has said the following on this as well. It makes sense to postpone a journey if possible. Agree to reschedule a meeting or visit if it's not vital. In that way, you're avoiding a lot of potential trouble for yourself and other people as well, and ensuring that you won't be putting additional strain on emergency and recovery crews as well. Ensuring that you and your car are properly prepared for winter can make a big difference towards keeping you safe on the road. So yeah, there you go, guys. Some top tips to try and stay safe during winter weather. It's very difficult driving in these conditions. The safest way, of course, is to not drive if it's very bad. I've been caught literally lower down my neighborhood sometimes, and it could have been, it could have been a lot worse had it been further away. The easiest thing to do is to not travel unless you absolutely have to before winter weather comes in. I mean, if you live somewhere like me on the top of a hill, basically, on the edge of the Pennines here, it gets wintry very quickly, and at the end of the day, you need to make sure that you got enough food in to last a couple of days at least, so you don't have to go running out to the supermarket. I'm quite lucky I can walk to the supermarket. I'm fit enough to be able to do that, but if you're elderly, if you're disabled, obviously that is just simply not an option in those kinds of conditions. So yeah, make sure you've always got some sort of backup plan just in case you have to do that journey or whatever. Make sure that you've got the equipment and everything in your car, and just take your time. Very few people crash because they're going too slowly and taking things too carefully, particularly in winter conditions, but a lot of people go too fast, skate on some ice, and end up in a wall or in another car, or even worse, hitting somebody as a result. So yeah, you can't be too careful with these conditions, but hopefully these top tips will help you out. So thanks to GEM for those. So new year, new you, but are you going to change your habits when it comes to vehicle safety in 2025? Well, let's have a look at this article, guys. Let's have a look what's been said around this, because we've covered many times here on the motoringchronicle.com about some questionable practices when it comes to drivers. A lot of drivers apparently don't know what the warning lights in their cars mean. A lot of people don't regularly check their car, and a lot of people drive around with warning lights on their car as well, which, yeah, that is all sorts of quite literally red flags right there. But let's have a look at what you can do to improve your conduct and the safety of your cars and journeys overall. Full article on themotoringchronicle.com. As the new year approaches, automotive data experts at HPI recommend that drivers make a set of resolutions that will keep them safe on the road throughout 2025 and beyond. HPI is urging motorists to double check that they are not putting themselves, passengers, or other road users at risk while driving a vehicle which has a hidden history. Over 250 cars are flagged daily for security concerns, and 1 in every 28 cars on HPI's register has been written off. Furthermore, over 50,000 vehicles were flagged as stolen in 2024, and over 662,000 cars have already been caught this year with an altered mileage reading, meaning that your vehicle could be hiding the truth. Here are some suggested resolutions for vehicle safety that HPI recommends. Prioritize vehicle maintenance. Regular maintenance checks will ensure your vehicle remains in optimal condition, and it'll help prevent potential mechanical failures that could compromise your safety. Also, remember to keep all records and paperwork up to date, such as service books and MOTs, and it can help to preserve or even boost the value of your vehicle when you come to sell it. Neglecting car maintenance poses a financial burden and can compromise safety. Poorly maintained vehicles contribute to accidents across the United Kingdom, with issues such as faulty brakes and worn-out tyres being common culprits. Establishing a proactive maintenance plan ensures that your car is safe and helps identify minor problems before they escalate further. Regular checks on tyre pressures, engine oil levels, coolant levels, and the screen wash system are essential for this. Stay on top of vehicle software updates. Yes, guys, modern cars have to update their software. That really freaked me out with my car the first time that happened. I was like, what's going on here? Because I thought it was like taking it from my phone saying that's doing a software update. No, the car was doing one. And these are important as well, because keeping vehicle software up to date with manufacturer recalls to help prevent the rising trend of key code hacking as well. As keyless entry has become increasingly more common in cars, it has driven a rise in car theft. With technology available online, a thief can intercept the code sent out by the key and create an unlocking code for your car, allowing them to gain access to it and then drive off. It's essential to check if your car is subject to any recalls that will cover security and safety upgrades. Someone on my dad's estate not too long ago, they had their car taken. Basically just two dudes came up in laptops and like balaclavas and like hoodies and stuff like that, so they were completely obscured. CCTV got them, but you can't see who they are. And they just came up with like a laptop and like some like coat hanger thing or something like that and unlocked the car. And they were gone in 30 seconds. It was literally as quick as that. It was quite scary to watch, to be honest. Get your vehicle's mileage checked as well. Over 1,000 1,800 cars are flagged every day with inaccurate mileage, so it's important not to get tricked by a clocked odometer. And in addition to this, nearly 1 in 10 cars checked found its mileage have a discrepancy as well. Yeah, so a good way to do that is just to go online and look at the MOT history. You'll be able to see the mileage of the car. If at its last MOT it was, say, 50,000 miles on the clock, and you're trying to buy the car and it says 30,000, that ain't it, chief. That's a lie. They've definitely fiddled with the odometer there and set the clock back. Check your car's identity and make sure it hasn't been cloned. The practice of cloning involves changing a car's identity, and it usually happens because the car has been stolen and thieves want to sell it quickly to an unsuspecting buyer. It can also occur when organised criminals want to avoid detection, so they clone a car that can't be linked to them or at a lower level, when offenders want to avoid paying traffic or parking fines generated by ANPR cameras. Falsifying a car's identity can involve changing the number plates, forging documents such as the V5, which is the registration certificate, and tampering with the vehicle identifying number, the VIN. I've done a more in-depth video going over cloning and how you can avoid it. But the easiest way to avoid it, in a certain sense, other than buying a used car, how to avoid your car being cloned: don't put pictures of your car online with the number plate. Never do that. If you're going to put a picture of your car online, yeah, no problem whatsoever. Just black out the number plate. Just scribble on it. Just blur it out or something, because otherwise people can quite easily clone your car from that. Don't get scammed if you're buying a used car as well. If you're in the market for picking up a used car next year, there are many things that you have to consider before parting with your money. Working out what to buy, where to buy it, and how to buy something that isn't a liability can be a minefield, but if you do your homework, you can minimize the risks. One of the surest ways to protect yourself is by investing in a HPI vehicle history check, which will flag whether the car has an insurance write-off, has been stolen, or has an outstanding finance on it, or hasn't been clocked. Know your vehicle's history. Whether you're buying a used car or already own one, it's essential to understand its history. The HPI check report will flag any worrying information held by the vehicle, by finance and insurance companies, and the DVLA, the police, and any other industry bodies are included in that as well. A comprehensive HPI tech check is the most important check before buying a used car and is the first line of defense against vehicle fraud. Drive economically for safer, cheaper motoring. Given the ongoing cost of living challenges around the country, fluctuating fuel prices as well, you should drive economically and support your savings as a result. Combining trips, maintaining steady speeds, and reducing unnecessary stops can all contribute to overall vehicle safety. Smooth driving with a gentle acceleration, avoiding sudden braking, and maintaining a safe distance from the vehicle in front are all effective techniques for economical driving. Embrace these habits to improve safety, save money, and contribute to a more sustainable approach to driving. And then there's a quote from one of the guys at HPI, the managing consultant there. I'm not going to read that out. You can read it though if you go on to themotoringchronicle.com. I hope you guys found that informative. Like I said, at the end of the day, there's only so much you can do when it comes to make sure you have safe motoring. I mean, just on a side note, like I was alluding to in the intro, don't drive around without warning lights. That's another good way to do it. I know it sounds obvious, but a lot of people do it apparently. So yeah, those are just some tips to help you avoid some scams and just make sure that you don't make a very unwise purchase in the new year. So new year, new you. If you're going for a used car though, one that's not new, those tips will help keep you safe. Oh man, another week, another negative story when it comes to the state of the UK car industry, which is just seeming like it's getting worse and worse right now. Now, I've covered extensively about why the UK's car industry is in a lot of problems right now and why this is really coming to a head as we head into 2025. A lot of it's down to the ZEV mandate, the Zero Emissions Vehicle mandate, which basically says that car manufacturers have to manufacture a certain percentage of cars as EVs compared to traditional petrol and diesel vehicles. Now, these estimates, when they were put in place years ago, were, as it turns out, a bit inaccurate because of unforeseen circumstances, because the amount of demand for electric vehicles has not been as high as what was initially anticipated. And I've already gone into detail about how that has to change and what can be done now to save things. But I saw the other day in the Times that there was a very bad headline when it came to Ford. Now, Ford obviously are an American company, but they have a lot of employees here in the UK. The UK being a huge market for Ford, and also a lot of their cars are manufactured in the UK and then exported to the rest of Europe. But when it comes to these guys, they are looking like they're going to get a £100 million bill for not selling enough electric cars in 2024. Now, the reason for this is because of the ZEV mandate. Like I said, it's got that certain percentage there, and if you don't achieve that percentage of sales for electric vehicles, you get fined. You get fined £15,000 per car that you have not actually sold in terms of electric vehicles. So in the case of Ford, if I just do a bit of very quick maths here, if they're getting a £100 million bill, that means they've effectively not sold enough EVs to the tune of over 6,000. And in fact, only 6.8% of their sales have been electric in the first 11 months of 2024, according to reports. So they're not going to be able to achieve that throughout December. Of course, we're very nearly at the very end of the year itself. I'm recording this on the 30th of December, so you will likely see this at that time. And it just speaks to a really, really sad state of affairs. Now, I'm not sure what other countries are doing in terms of their regulations, but the fact is that the UK's regulations are not really there. Now, I would show you this full Times article. Normally I would read through it, but unfortunately to read the Times these days you need a subscription, and I don't have one, and I don't want to get one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read a slightly older article from The Guardian here. Jasper Jolly writing this. He's not looking very jolly in his picture, and I don't blame him really, because it's a bit of a negative story overall here. So I'm just going to go through this, and again, just give some more of my thoughts at the end of this video. So shout out to The Guardian for covering this story. When Ford announced this week that it was cutting 800 jobs in the UK, the US car maker also had stern words for the government. It has joined in a chorus of criticism of rules that force car companies to sell more electric vehicles each year. That percentage of ZEV mandate cars in terms of their actual zero emissions, that does increase each year. So Ford are going to get fined £100 million for not making enough electric cars in 2024. And when inevitably they don't reach the same percentage that they need to get in 2025, which will actually be slightly higher. Let me just rephrase that. So I can't remember what the percentage is. It probably will say in this article. Let's just say it's 15%. Next year in 25, it'll be like 18. And then in 26, it'll be 22, 23. It scales like that. So if they're behind now, they're going to continue to be behind. And that amount that they will be behind will increase. So 100 million this year could be 150 million next year, for example. And Ford has said that these regulations are unworkable. Someone should have told Ford back in 2022 when the car maker strongly backed the policy. In fact, it went further, calling for the British government to force car makers to sell even more electric cars each year. So they've really made a rod for their own back with this one. But we can still change this. We can still save this. But the government's got to do something. And by the way, before anybody says, and I've said this several times in my other videos as well, this policy was brought in by the previous government. People blaming Labour for all this, but it's Labour's fault. The new government needs to solve this. I agree with the last one of those statements, but this is not entirely Labour's fault. Although, like I've said, if these fines happen and car makers do leave the UK, it's kind of the government's fault at the moment. And I need to stress that. There has to be something done about it. But in 2024, at least, nothing is going to happen. And that is very concerning, I'll be honest. Ford believes that figures lower than the Department for Transportation's current proposed trajectory will not send a strong enough signal to customers, manufacturers and investors to spur the appropriate transition, it said at the time. Furthermore, any lowering of targets will send the wrong signal in terms of charging infrastructure rollout. So they really don't have a right to complain. I will be honest, although I do think things should change for sure. The car maker did argue that the policy should be subject to review if the industry conditions change. Okay, so they said that, and that's what I think needs to happen. According to the government consultation response obtained by the Fast Charge newsletter. But the dramatic shift in its position nevertheless illustrates how the industry has been caught out by the slowing growth in demand for electric cars. During the chaos of the coronavirus pandemic, with interest rates at rock bottom, car makers found that they could sell all the cars they could to make, albeit amid problems in getting parts. That has changed now. Car makers are not experiencing the same demand for electric cars, with a resurgence instead in sales of hybrids that combine a petrol engine with a smaller battery. Hybrids are a better option than purely ICE cars, purely cars that have got combustion engines and nothing else to propel them. Demand for electric cars has been hit by concerns over public charger numbers. I mean, the infrastructure is just not here in the UK at all, let's be real here. As well as political backlash, veering into more full-on culture war from critics of net zero carbon policies who argue they are too expensive. Battery cars remain more expensive up front, even if much cheaper in the long run, despite manufacturers being forced into steep discounts that they argue are unsustainable. They probably are unsustainable. The car makers have launched a rearguard action lobbying effort to persuade the UK government to relax the mandate, but now find themselves pitted against car charger companies, fleet owners, and environmental campaigners who argue that climate change targets and billions of pounds in investment will be under threat if the UK government backtracks. I mean, that is the counter argument, and I get it. I get what they're saying. I do, but people have got to work. People have got to earn a living, and we've already seen some of the negative effects of this. That being, of course, that plants are closing. The Luton plant for Vauxhall is closing, and I know some of those people have been relocated up to Ellesmere Port in Cheshire, but that's a long way away. That's a good 3-4 hour drive. That's 150 miles. Not everybody's going to be able to do that, and people will lose out as a result. Under the mandate, electric cars must make up 22% of sales of new vehicles this year, rising to 28 and 25. So it's even more than I thought it was, actually, when I was doing my example before. Albeit with important loopholes that can reduce the target considerably. If they miss their targets, car makers face fines of up to $15,000 per vehicle. No car makers publicly argue with the goal of 80% battery vehicles by 2030 before a complete ban on new petrol and diesel vehicles in 2035. The mandate is sure to be a key focus for the Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders, SMMT, when the lobby's group members convene on Tuesday evening at its annual black tie dinner. Executives at a hotel on Park Lane in London will expect to be ribbed by the host, comedian and TV presenter Tom Allen. For the industry, the ZEV mandate is no laughing matter. After months of requests on Wednesday, several car makers met the Transport Secretary Louise Hay and Business Secretary Jonathan Reynolds in London to plead for more leeway. So basically, I mean, going off of this graph here on The Guardian, essentially what it's showing is that the green line is what is, that's what they're wanting to happen originally, the government. That's the percentages they're wanting to go with. Now, in the long term, they're not wanting to change it. 2030 goal is still there. 2035 goal is still there, 100%. But the path to getting there has effectively been, that's what they're wanting to do. The car manufacturers are wanting to lower it. So in 25, for example, it'll still be higher than what it was this year. Instead of being 25%, looking at that graph, it'd be 24 or 23. So it's not a massive dip, really, when you think about it. But what I would say to that as a counter argument to it would be that ramp up between 27 and 2030 is an incredibly steep line, rather than being a more linear path like it is now, which in theory is more achievable. But I mean, it's a tough one. It's a tough one. I personally think if they do go with that orange path there, that amended one, they're not going to be able to hit the targets in the long run. Maybe by 2035, maybe things will accelerate more, but to hit the target of 2030, 80% of new vehicles, I think that is more than a bit ambitious. I really do. Japanese car manufacturer Nissan, which runs the UK's largest car factory in Sunderland, said the mandate was threatening the viability of thousands of jobs and billions of pounds in investment. Even in the industry, insiders think it is unrealistic that the company would really abandon the plant. I don't want to call them on that bluff. Stellantis, the owner of Vauxhall, Peugeot and Citroën brands, claimed in the summer of 2024 that it could close plants in Ellesmere Port and Luton because of the mandate. They have currently closed the one in Luton. That will go. Ellesmere Port will be increased. It will be expanded to accommodate more staff and have more of an actual battery facility there, but it's still a downturn. It's still people losing their jobs. I'd say it is definitely not a positive thing that they've done that. I don't fully blame them for it. It would have been nice if we could keep it, but there we go. Yet, car makers are not the only groups claiming that billions of pounds are on the line. Companies are racing to install the chargers that electric cars require. Vicky Reid, who is the chief executive of Charge UK, a lobby group, was also in the room with ministers. She said there is a £6 billion of lined-up investment predicted on their ZEV mandate. Flip-flopping, as with Conservative Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's decision to delay the ban on new petrol cars by 5 years, damages investment, she says. I mean, I criticise Sunak for a lot of stuff, but I don't think delaying that by 5 years was such a bad idea, really. I mean, it's bad for their business, of course, and she's got to look, and she's looking out for their interest. That's what lobbying is, basically. I get that, but yeah, I mean, there's no point investing in a dead horse. And I'm not saying that battery technology is a dead horse, but come on, it's got its limits. We must not make the same mistake again, she said. Anything that leads to fewer fully electric vehicles on UK roads is a no-go for us because it means fewer customers. It's tricky to work out how much pressure individual car makers are actually under. The headline target is 22% of electric car sales, but in reality they can earn credits that lower it. Those credits include lowering the average emissions of the new petrol cars and borrowing excess electric cars made in later years. Another option is buying credits from other brands, although the British industry bristles at the thought of subsidising rivals such as China's BYD or the US's Tesla. Yeah, that's the thing, they'd have to get it from other countries, which of course doesn't help out the UK economy now, does it? With all the loopholes, the think tank New Automotive has calculated that the real target for 2022 is 18.1%, right in line with the 18.1% electric sales achieved in the first 10 months of 2024. The SMMT disputes those calculations, though, pointing to disparities between its sales figures and the think tanks, although it has not yet come up with another estimate. I mean, and look at this graph here as well. I mean, that is the headline there, basically. That is what it is. You know, the electric car sales are increasing overall, but interestingly, in 2024, we've not seen the big average spike this year. I mean, you look at this here, there's some big spikes there, one for 20, one for 21 as we go into there, one for 22 as we head into there, one for 23. There's usually a big spike at the end of each of these years. I mean, it's midpoint for 2020, but 2020 was a complete outlier in terms of everything, really, because of the pandemic and everything. It just shut down everything, didn't it? So it was a bit different. But yeah, I mean, we've not had that big spike. It is slowly going up towards the end of the year, but it's not on the kind of levels of what we've seen previously. So it's going up, just not as fast as what it was, and that's the problem. The demand is not there, even though there's all these, unsustainable incentives that are there too. Ben Nelms, who's the New Automotive chief executive, said there is a high level of uncertainty and the target could reduce more or less depending on the decisions taken by the manufacturers. Nevertheless, he said that if the current trends are maintained, it is realistic to think that the real target for 25 could be between 24 and 25% rather than the headline of 28. Car makers are now arguing for more of those handy flexibilities. Ideas presented to ministers this week include allowing car makers to comply if they overachieve on targets in later years and giving extra credits to electric car makers in Britain. A policy that could be attractive given the political importance of maintaining UK jobs. The business department is thought to be open to relaxing the rules, but the industry has so far found the transport department less than responsive to its entreaties. No, never heard of that word before. Fancy words on newspapers. Who would have guessed? As it keeps its eye on climate goals. Colin Walker, the head of Transport at Energy and Climate Intelligence Unit, a campaign group, argued that the mandate is working and is good for British consumers. The mandate is an incentivizing manufacturers to compete on price. As prices come down, sales are going up, with more than 1 in 5 new cars sold in the UK being an EV in the last 3 months. Whatever happens, the industry is unlikely to let up on the pressure from the government, given job cuts, failing profits, and a steep investment needed around the world. It is likely that some of them will face fines if the rules are as they are. Yeah, Ford with their 100 million. David Bailey, the professor of business and economics at the University of Birmingham, said that he believed more flexibilities are warranted. The ramp up is really quite severe, he said. I think companies will struggle to hit that. I agree. So what happens from here? Well, it looks like in the short term, companies are going to be fined. Ford's going to be fined 100 million. We don't know what the others are going to be fined. And even those that don't get fined, unfortunately, the reality is that they will be taking a financial hit by doing what they're doing. Manufacturing more electric vehicles than they can sell. That is going to be a financial money pit, effectively. It's really going to hurt them. So, man, it's honestly, it's depressing. It really is depressing reading stuff like this, but it's important now. So that's why I want to bring it to you at the end of the day. I hope we get some better news going through 2025, but the fallout, the aftermath of this is unfortunately not going to go away. We're going to be hearing about all kinds of fines for some companies, and the companies that aren't being fined, those unfortunately are going to get a big hit in terms of the cars they're manufacturing. They're not going to be able to make as much money for all the effort. And car companies leaving the UK, downsizing, relocating. It's all bad. It's not good stuff. This is not something that is going to incentivize new companies to come. It's all right, you know. It's hard to it's hard to attract new customers. It's much easier to maintain the ones you've already got. I will say that there is a good point in terms of it being good for consumers. I mean, I know a few people who've had bought electric cars recently because the incentives are so good. It's a no-brainer. But it's good for the consumer, yes, but it's bad for business. It's bad for businesses in the long term. It is unsustainable. That is clear. I believe them when they say that, because I'm not going to go into the numbers of it specifically, but my good friend who I talk to a lot about stuff like this, she's got an electric car, and the price she pays for her electric car per month is laughably cheap. And it's new as well. It was new when she got it. So it's one of them where it's like, how on earth have you managed that? And that's with, in general, interest rates being sky high right now. She pays no interest on it. It's incredible. It's an incredible situation. But that's just my thoughts on it, guys. A long video here, I know. But like I said, this is a subject that is very important and it needs to be highlighted. I'm going to continue to highlight it. Whenever I see stories about this, I'm going to do it because, listen, I get it, I went through engineering school. I wanted to be in the automotive industry. I didn't end up doing that, but I know a lot of people who are. And Britain has a lot of things to be proud of. And I think its car manufacturing industry is one of those things. I know, again, a lot of people in my comments are saying, oh, the industry in the UK is dead. It's not. It's not dead. Tell that to the thousands of people working in it right now. Tell them it's dead. If it was dead, what are they being paid for? But it's sick. It needs help right now. And some of these policies, in my opinion, are actively harming it. And I've said this on a number of occasions, and my opinion has not changed. It's been further shored up by that incredible 9-figure fine that Ford are getting. They'll leave. They will leave. If that continues, they will go. Yes, of course. They probably regret what they said earlier this year. Absolutely. What they said was dumb, as it turns out, because they're going to get hurt by it. But for me, it's got to change. These regulations have to be amended. They have to be, and just lower the percentages. That's all they got to do. Just make them numbers smaller, make them more achievable. 18% for this year, 22% for next year. Sit down with them, talk to them, because if you're not careful, they'll leave the room. They'll never come back, and thousands of people will lose their jobs for nothing.